Thank you, and thank you so much for inviting me. It's always so lovely to mix with this great community. I thoroughly appreciate it. So as Robin says, I'm Nicola Bailey, and I've been very lucky throughout my working career to have the honour of working and supporting lots of parents and families through a variety of different roles. And during those experiences, I've become acutely aware of the significant role that support for mothers plays in determining the outcomes for children. And so today I want to have a look at that transition into parenthood. But before we get going, I would quite like to kind of know a bit about who's out there and who's listening. So what I'd like to do is ask you a few questions, and I'd like you, if the answer to the question is yes, I'd like you to raise your hand. So you'd need to click onto the reaction button at the bottom of your screen. There's an option there to raise your hand if the answer to the questions is yes. So if everyone's up for this, here we go. Question number 1. Can you raise your hand if you are a parent? Thanks. I just make sure I can see everyone. Perfect, that's for you. Okay. Can you keep your hand raised if you have parented a child through adolescence? So that's nice of you. Can you keep your hand raised if in the role of parent, you've ever felt unsure of your own parenting, whether you've had questions or uncertainties?
Definitely.
Okay, keep that hand raised if you've ever felt judged or criticised in terms of your parenting, whether that's from another parent or maybe a professional or maybe indeed your own child. I should be putting my hand up to all these as well, actually. And also keep your hand raised if you've ever suffered from anxiety, worry, sleepless nights, possibly depression, feeling isolated or lonely that's linked to being a parent. Keep your hand raised if at some stage in that parenting journey you access professional help. Keep your hand raised, or raise your hand again if you think you would have accessed professional help if it had been easy to access and judgment-free. Okay, thank you very much. You can hands down. Yeah, we're done with the hands. That's very nice. Thank you very much. But it's interesting. Those responses are very much resonate with my understanding that becoming a parent and making a family is one of the most enjoyable and incredible opportunities that we are given as humans, but it can also be one of the toughest challenges. And I mean, right from the very get-go. So today, I want to talk about the transition into parenthood and to consider the importance of the importance of a really good start. I'd like to begin by reading you an extract from my forthcoming book, which is all about the urgent need to support parents. The section is entitled "The Challenges of Being Ourselves and Being a Parent." To be a balanced and effective parent demands each of us makes inroads into knowing ourselves, even if just a little. We need to understand what's important to us, where our priorities lie, and what our needs are, all of which helps to clarify and bolster our personal identities and values. But our internal dialogue about who we are doesn't necessarily fall in step with social expectations as we move into parenthood. And however far along the continuum of self-understanding we are, our identity, in whatever state it's in, becomes dislocated and interrupted, especially so for mothers at that point of joining parenthood. And this new and personal journey brings a sort of jerky gear change in perceptions and expectations of ourselves and those around us. Now, our identities are often related to how we define ourselves, and many of us will refer to outcomes that we've made through conscious choice. For example, we may link who we are with our chosen work path, or the friendship groups we hang out with, or the lifestyles that we've chosen, rather than our assigned roles, such as a sister or a daughter or a neighbour. And whether we're satisfied with our identity or whether we see it as a work in progress, typically we understand its future to be ours to determine. Indeed, as a child-free adult, we're free to choose who and what we are, and it's this liberty that's hijacked at the start of parenthood. So let me be a bit more specific. In practical terms, pre-pregnancy, most women will eat what they want, exercise how and when they want, create their own daily routines, make decisions based on what best suits them. They take responsibility for themselves and they live a life that progresses or at least maintains that personal identity that they hold. However, once a woman realizes she's pregnant, typically there's a reactionary shift in the way of life and how they self-nurture. Let me tell you about a work colleague, Hannah. Hannah is a primary school teacher and a scout leader in her spare time. And when she first found out she was pregnant, she was surprised but delighted. And reportedly, it took her a couple of weeks to get her head around the idea that there was another human living inside her. Yet, even while she was working through that realization, she almost instantly upgraded her diet to include more calcium, less junk food. She adjusted her exercise activities and she increased her rest. Right from day one, she was making decisions about how she was living her life based completely around someone else's. And for the best part of that first 3 months of pregnancy, Hannah was chronically sick and exhausted, and that really impacted her usual efficiency and high energy at work. And she told me one day that she sensed that the focus of her work and her social identity was shifting away from being a professional to one of someone who was socially incumbent upon motherhood. And it wasn't a feeling she was happy about. In fact, she confessed to me that she was really quite anxious and doubtful about what her future professional life would look like going forward. But during her second group of 3 months, her second trimester, Hannah felt much better. And by the third, she radiated good health and she developed quite a bump. Enough of a bump, in fact, that she was asked to reconsider her intended participation as the leader of the Scout group's camping and outdoor activity weekend that she had planned. And Hannah was really upset by this. She had, like many years before, she had arranged everything. And at the point of planning, and booking it all, she fully anticipated taking a full role. And when she spoke to me about how she felt, she was genuinely conflicted. She actually wanted to protect her unborn child, yet in doing so, her personal identity was greatly challenged. Hannah saw herself as reliable, committed, part of the team, but by acting accordingly, was in direct conflict with her commitment as a mum-to-be. She felt she had no choice but to duck out of the team and leave colleagues to fill in for her. And Hannah felt her identity, values, integrity, really the essence of who she was really being eroded by being pregnant. And she realised decisions that she thought she was making about herself were in fact based around the needs of the unborn child, and they didn't always mirror each other. But more than that, she realised her decisions were coloured by opinions and expectations of others, which seemed to squeeze out any space for herself and her own identity. Now, Hannah's story isn't unusual. For the majority of women, the process of becoming a mother has dramatically, and sadly, it's generally overlooked, this huge effect that it has on a woman's identity. From conception forward, a mum's to-be identity becomes a hybrid of her pre-pregnant self, her transitioning role, and the temporary role as body sharer. And traditionally, women are showered with medical assessment and monitoring and intervention on a but there's much less attention given to establishing their psychological needs for expertise and support. Anthropologists, however, positively embrace this transitioning phase of psychological and emotional change, and they refer to this as, they've given it a name, they call it matrescence. And it's an expression that's been around since the 1970s, early 70s, and yet it remains disappointingly underused and under-recognised. And even while I was typing the notes for this talk, it came to my notice that my spell check didn't recognise it as a real word. And it's been around for 30 something years. So matrescence then gives an explanation to the motherhood feeling of kind of being split or composite. And it gives name to that body morphing and hormone shifting that occurs during pregnancy, which creates upheaval of emotions and a turbulence of one's social identity. And it's also linked to uncertainty and self-doubt, generated by both the irreversible and the temporary changes that being a parent brings. And many women struggle with matrescence, and the manifestations can be quite different for each one of them, each woman. But the root cause is always the same. It's always linked to the identity change and uncertainty. And that balance of wanting to be yourself as a woman and wanting to be the best parent that you can be for the child is a real difficult balance to master. And the adjustment needs time and support. And we know from research over the last 20 years, those who successfully achieve that parental identity are more likely to parent with an authoritative style, which is widely recognised to be the most beneficial for children's outcomes. And for parents who struggle to reach parental identity, there's a greater risk of poorer personal well-being, a greater risk of being diagnosed with perinatal depression. There's less parenting confidence, which often leads to opting for less effective parenting strategies, and it creates poorer bonding between the parent and the baby. Yet, despite our knowledge of the importance of supporting parents through this transitional phase, little has been done to put into practice any kind of provision of psychological support, or indeed any wider education for either the parents-to-be or those around them. And that's why I'm raising this as a topic of thought today. At the beginning of this talk, I asked you several questions about your own experiences, and most of you indicated that you had felt uncertainty about your own parenting at times, and you had felt judged. And most of you also raised a hand when I was asking about sort of loneliness and depression. So today I'd ask you to hold on to some of those threads of your own parenting journey and to let those threads help you be the lifeline to support somebody else's needs. It's no accident that matrescence sounds like adolescence, because they share things in common. They're both significantly controlled by hormones. They're both related to significant body changes. They're both huge and permanent shifts in your personal and social identity, and they require fresh new social negotiation. And most importantly, they're both absolutely normal. And in many ways, they require a similar sort of handling to adolescence. And that's where we come in. That's when we can step up and help people who need the support. We can make sure that we personalise our conversations. It's super tempting when we see a pregnant woman or we see a parent with a newborn to immediately ask about the baby. But ask about the parents. It's really important that they feel seen and that they feel heard, and they have an opportunity to tell you whether they're going through a difficult time. We can be the confidence booster. We can recognise that each parent is unique, as is their family, and their parenting confidence comes through trial and improvement. It's so tempting to want to share all our own parenting lessons that we've learned, but actually encouraging them to work out what they and their family needs is so much more empowering. And we can share reassurance, kindness and support. I'm sure we all remember days when parenting was tough, and sometimes all that we need is a listening ear, an extra pair of hands, and just because something seems uncomfortable or on one day unworkable doesn't mean it's broken, doesn't mean it's wrong. Our parents don't need fixing. What they need is a little more emotional and practical support. But more than that, they need the reassurance they're doing a great job. And finally, if we can remind them that they are loved and valued, and that they should take time to love and value themselves too, we'll be doing them a real huge service, because it's only when they love and value themselves they're ready to be a positive parent. Thanks for listening.